Do stadiums make good neighbors? Well, it depends on who you ask. Do you live near Wrigley Field, where the Cubs play? Well, you probably knew what you were getting into when you moved here, so you probably enjoy it, at least for a little while. That said, living next to any of the other stadiums here in Chicago, it's not even possible. They're cut off by huge highways and stranded in the middle of parking lots. The nearest neighbor might be an elderly care facility without any vibrant community in sight. In most cities across the United States, their stadiums too are like the ones that people don't live next to. But that's changing.
The Bears may not be the only Chicago sports team eyeing a new home.
The White Sox may also be on the move.
In recent years, mixed-use developments headlined by sports arenas have begun sprouting up all over. In them, the enormous stadiums are next to entertainment and commercial, office, and even residential buildings. There's over 200 stadium projects going on in the world right now. In fact, there might be a brand new one of these here in Chicago soon. No matter where they are, though, a lot is riding on these new developments. When done well, they bring new jobs and generate tax revenue, they lure tourists, and spur economic and physical development in their wake. But when executed poorly, these massive undertakings decimate neighborhoods with black holes that sit empty for weeks on end, hostile to anyone that might want to live, visit, or even just pass by. For all of these, though, Wrigley Field is often considered the gold standard. When there's no game going on, this area is filled with life and activity. And when there is a game, well, that's another story. But afterward, everything goes back to normal pretty quickly. The stadium helped support the surrounding community, and it stood the test of time to become fully absorbed within it. It's so beloved that it was designated an historic landmark in 2004. Why haven't other cities and stadiums just been doing this all along? And can the new ones replicate its success? Will people all of a sudden want a stadium for a neighbor? And are they willing to pay for it? On the surface, the context of Wrigley Field is the least ideal stadium in Chicago for accommodating crowds. It's a pain to get to from the highway. There's almost no place to park nearby, and it's surrounded by residences and apartment buildings. This is a huge liability. Homeowners notoriously fight any changes that might disrupt their neighborhood. NIMBYs. The Cubs were confined to playing only day games for 50 years after other teams started playing at night. Wrigley Field was the last MLB venue to have lights installed in 1988, all because night games might disturb nearby residents. The stadium is almost completely integrated and entangled within the local urban fabric. It's often difficult to tell where the stadium begins and ends. You can watch games from the roofs of nearby buildings, for instance. There's a standalone building on the northwest of the same block. Is that part of the stadium? Across the street is a hotel made of the same brick with the same brick sidewalk. Is that part of it too? In one sense, yeah, they are part of the stadium. That building on the northeast corner is the Wrigley Field office building. And among many other things, its interconnectedness with its neighbor solves a very specific problem. Before it was built in 2017, if you were sitting in the right field bleachers during a game, you would have been distracted by the constant sounds of garbage trucks. The stadium didn't have enough space to store all of the trash generated during a single game, over 315 tons every single game. So the trash had to be emptied 3 times every game. The stadium in its current form simply cannot accommodate everything needed to host a modern baseball game. But the building's landmark status severely limits what can be changed. The designation is meant to protect how structures look and to preserve their original character. This means no additions or extensions. It also means that engineers and designers had to get clever to solve this trash problem. The solution was to create a building that sat outside the boundary of the landmark protection zone and then connect it underground with a tunnel. The new structure serves as the stadium's back door with all the loading docks, and is also where the staff and the players enter. And underground, in the basement, there's much needed temporary storage for trash. Everything that might change Wrigley Field or affect the immediate area is scrutinized at an extremely high level. When the lights were added, they reviewed 28 different options to find the best solution that lit up the field just right, while minimizing the disruption of the neighborhood. The work that gave us the clever trash solution was part of a larger set of renovations called 1060. The project was named after the building's address and included new structural solutions from foundations all the way up to the roof, renovations of the iconic scoreboard and sign, and a host of other amenities. All this work, it had to be done incrementally in stages between baseball seasons. The constraints of the building that's imposed by its physical surroundings means that every change is careful and deliberate. Evolution here takes time, and each change can be studied and then corrected. Let's compare that to Chicago's other baseball venue on the city's south side. It's now called Guaranteed Rate Field, and it's where the White Sox play. but they don't want to play there anymore. But we'll get to that. For now, they play here. Before that, they played here. This is where the original Comiskey Park used to be. In 1909, Charles Comiskey turned a former garbage dump into a premier destination for baseball, with a symbiotic relationship to its surroundings. It was easily accessible by streetcar and the Green Line trains, and you could watch games from nearby rooftops here too. There were some nearby residential areas, especially to the south. It was also surrounded by quite a bit of manufacturing and rail yards, but the location resonated with working-class fans of the White Sox.
In the 1980s, the White Sox decided that the stadium, it needed an upgrade. But they didn't want to be the only ones to pay for it. I mean, why should they? A new stadium brings all kinds of benefits to the whole surrounding area. So it's only fitting that the government should chip into this investment that benefits everyone. And the team threatened to go somewhere else if they didn't get what they wanted.
At the time, it was believed that accessibility by car was one of the most important factors in the success of attracting fans to be able to attend games. That would be coupled with obvious considerations inside that just bolster the fans' experience during the game. This area was already quite accessible by car thanks to the highway that was cut through here during the 1950s. So a new stadium was proposed to the block south of Comiskey Park. Funding for the new structure came from hotel taxes and other public revenues, and all this was managed by the Illinois Sports Facilities Authority, or the ISFA. Its sole purpose is to manage what was then called New Comiskey Park. But despite being built and paid for by the nearby government, the building itself does very little to physically benefit the local community. The design could have been located almost anywhere, in any city or suburb across the country. Sure, it incorporates a few cues from the old park, like the arched windows and the exploding scoreboard, but everything else about it is pretty generic. And once the building was complete, the old one was razed, and then the site turned into a parking lot. And boy, are there a lot of parking lots. 70 acres worth, for a total of 7,000 individual spaces. No stadium, no matter how fancy, could ever deliver on the promise of directly benefiting this community. The nearby house is blocks away. So we have two very different situations. One stadium that's completely severed from its context, while the other's almost completely inseparable from it. The severed one is completely paid for with public tax dollars, and it's owned by the government. Meanwhile, Wrigley Field, which is fully integrated into the neighborhood, is privately owned and operated. Doesn't that seem like it should be the opposite?
That's not to say that Wrigley Field hasn't benefited from taxpayer-funded programs. It certainly has, just differently and in ways that better deliver on the promise of those funds actually going towards the community and the things that it cares about.
For instance, many of the recent renovations to Wrigley were made possible through tax breaks made available because of its status as an historic landmark. The idea is that the restrictions that this imposes, like not being able to add on, those restrictions are offset by tax relief. This helps pay for the costs of pricey renovations that might have to go toward preserving the integrity of the structure. Also, Wrigley's lack of parking and highway access means that it places a heavy burden on other transportation systems that are supported by the city. Every single home game draws tens of thousands of people that swarm the area, stay for a couple hours, then leave. Over 40% of fans arrive by public transit. The Cubs ownership doesn't pay for any of that. However, the investment in public transit by the city benefits residents year-round.
Now here we are. Most teams around the country followed a path similar to the White Sox, either publicly owned stadiums, severed from their community, or both. These teams, including the White Sox, they see the potential of moving into a more integrated neighborhood setting, and they're looking to get that kind of thing built and then make the move.
This pays off when attendance increases, and everything is made sweeter when the other programs can help generate year-round activity, which ultimately then spurs growth in the nearby area. Also, fans win when they get to be closer to their favorite teams. That's what the initial plans show for this 62-acre proposal in Chicago, known as the 78. It's being developed into a brand new neighborhood with entertainment and office, residential, and other institutional programs. The area is close to downtown, adjacent to the river, and well-served by public transportation.
The White Sox want in, but yet again, they're asking for millions in public taxpayer dollars to help make it happen. But I don't want you to think that this is just a story about Chicago or its baseball teams. This is the playbook for the vast majority of stadiums that are seeking to move into downtowns today across the country.
But it's not even the only debate around publicly funding a new stadium happening in Chicago right now.
This plan is going to become a reality. Chicago Bears president Kevin Warren says that Springfield needs to act quickly on a funding bill to cover the gap.
We have an opportunity here to build a year-round place where this city can come together.
The vast majority of economists, 83% of them when asked, agree that the cost-benefit of stadium financing rarely favors the city. When things don't pan out, fans end up feeling exploited and things just go downhill from there. Ultimately, it drives a wedge between the fans, the neighborhood, and the team. In the past, this distance was literalized as parking lots in scenarios like what happened with guaranteed rate, but also the government agency, in this case the IFSA, gets put into a no-win scenario when fans want one thing and then the team wants something else.
Seems that everyone benefits if we just cut out the middleman. But don't mistake Wrigley's situation as completely ideal either. Everyone knows that inside the stadium, certain compromises are made. Also, the Cubs have made their fair share of threats to move to the suburbs if they didn't get their way. It's not like they chose the more difficult path because they're morally superior or something. The lesson that I take away from all this has to do with the power of incremental change and the rewards of just resisting the urge to wipe the slate clean and start over.
Very little of Wrigley is actually original. Maybe a few pieces of steel that hold up some of the roof and the grandstands near home plate. That's it. It's a perfect example of the ship of Theseus. That's the thought experiment that asks if every part of something has been changed or been replaced, is it really the same thing? Even the beloved ivy wall and manual scoreboard were added decades after the original structure was built, and then they were completely rebuilt as part of the recent renovation. But making changes incrementally slows things down. The effects of each adjustment can be studied and calibrated. It also offers a sense of continuity. Everyone and everything stays connected to the place as the stadium and the neighborhood grow together. The proposal for the White Sox of the '78 includes an updated version of the exploding scoreboard from Comiskey Park. I also personally like the proposal, and even the plan they're proposing for the old park. It includes adding dense housing, like the kind that would have been here originally, before all the parking lots.
But part of me wonders why this can't just happen anyway. And when these new developments move forward across the country, I hope that everyone can keep the lessons of the ship of Theseus model in mind. Let's think twice before jumping ship when things get challenging. Sometimes constraints can lead to things like ingenuity that pays off on longer timescales.
Anytime that I'm prepping for a trip to the stadium, or to record any video for that matter, I put on my favorite t-shirt by Cuts. I get a ton of comments that are just asking about where I get these awesome black t-shirts that I wear in every single one of my videos. The answer is always Cuts Clothing. I did a ton of research to be able to find out which shirt would be the right one for me. For videos, it's helpful to have a go-to for continuity's sake, in case filming takes over a couple days, it doesn't look like you've changed clothes and no one will notice. But I didn't want to just wear these for filming. It's my go-to staple for almost any occasion. Cuts Clothing are ultra comfortable and they keep their color and shape. And they're ready to wear right away after being folded up in a drawer or a bag. This one that I'm wearing is actually a couple years old at this point, and it's as dark as the day that I got it. I don't know how they do it, but honestly, these are the easiest pieces of clothing that I own, and they're such high quality that you can dress them up or down. You could go teach at school or go to the gym. Of course, they don't just have t-shirts either. All their pieces are designed and manufactured with the same level of care in mind. So head to cutsclothing.com and pick out a few things for yourself. When you're ready to check out, use the code Stewart Hicks and you'll get 20% off of your entire order. Share that code with anybody and let me know which pieces you've liked the most. You'll be rewarded with some exceptional clothes, and you'll be helping support this channel to make content that explores the built environment. Enjoy.